Half a day, and welcome to another episode of My Story. I'm Louise Muña. In this 1-hour show, we will touch on cancers in the female reproductive organs, as well as genetic cancer mutations, after a mother shares the story of her 2 children being diagnosed with cancer. We will also sit with medical professionals to discuss these cancers in general and at length. Here on My Story, our goal is to bring cancer to the forefront and create even more of an awareness on cancer and the steps we can all take to prevent being diagnosed. A local study compiled by the Guam Comprehensive Cancer Control earlier this year shows that unlike the rest of the United States, where cancer incidence and mortality are declining, here on Guam, new cancer cases and deaths from cancer continue to rise. The most common cancers on Guam include breast, lung, prostate, colon, cervical, liver, thyroid, uterus, leukemia, and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. We will discuss several of those cancers in this episode. So stay right there. My Story will return after these. Welcome back to My Story. Let me introduce you to our first guest, Yvonne Cruz. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us to share your story. You have a very interesting story. You have 3 boys.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So how old are they?
My oldest is 33.
Okay.
Jay would have been 29.
Okay.
And my youngest is 20.
Your youngest. Okay, so you have 3 boys.
That's correct.
That must have been interesting raising them.
They were fun.
Really? Okay, so, and they have about a 13-year span between the
Between my
youngest-
oldest and my youngest, yes.
How did they get along? Were they
They were all very close. They were close from
from the beginning?
the onset, yes.
Is there anybody more dominant than the other? Somebody more outgoing or outspoken?
They all have their strengths and weaknesses, but I would say my oldest is the
Okay.
one in charge.
Are any of them living here?
No,
No. Okay, so they're all staying in
California.
California. Does that make you feel like, wow, how come they don't want to come back to mama?
No, they have their interests and their own lives. They've grown up. I'm hoping I've equipped them with what they need to become independent and
Obviously, because they don't want to come back.
yeah,
right?
their
They've got
career
careers.
opportunity. Yeah,
Jay is the middle boy.
correct.
Did he have a career?
Yes, he was actually a photojournalist for a CBS affiliate out of
Oh,
Las
wow.
Vegas. Yeah, KLAS
In Las Vegas.
in Las Vegas. That's
So
correct.
did he study to be a
Yes,
camera?
he did have.
Is that what he wanted
received
to be since he was young?
He didn't really have anything specific that he said he wanted to be when he was young, but he's been writing stories since like elementary, middle school.
Well, take me back in time. Let's start when he was, younger. I mean, what kind of kid was he? Was he?
Jay, I've always referred to him as my Prince Charming
Oh,
because he was just always a sweet kid, always had a smile. He's a very giving child.
Okay.
He made friends very easily. He loved to talk.
really?
It's kind of interesting because he was actually kind of on the shy side and he didn't like public speaking as he got older, but as a kid he was a chatterbox.
Really?
He could tell stories and he had a speech impediment growing up.
You would never think that.
Yeah,
being a
as an
chatterbox.
adult, yeah. But no, because even when he started speaking, he lost a large percentage of his hearing from ear infections and things, and that was all resolved.
Okay.
But prior to that being resolved, his speech wasn't very clear. And so it was actually his oldest brother, John, who would be his interpreter, because Jay had a lot of frontal sounds
Okay.
when he spoke. So John would be the one to interpret whatever Jay said. John was the one, my oldest.
How many years apart is John and Jay?
They're 4 years apart.
4. So they grew up pretty close together. then.
Yes, they were very, very close.
So when John left to go to college, all of your boys went to college.
Yes.
So when John left, Jay was still here.
Yes.
Did he seem lost, maybe without his older
he missed
brother?
his brother, yes, he
did?
certainly did. He was very, he really looked up to John. John is actually like a father figure for both his brothers.
Okay.
He really took charge. in guiding them and laying down rules. He was actually the one who laid more rules than the rest of us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was.
So he was the disciplinarian.
Yes.
If you don't do this, I'm gonna.
Yeah, and it's because he wanted to be the one to provide guidance to his brothers in the choices that they made and how they made those choices.
So is that what inspired Jay to say, okay, I'm going to go to college too, I'm going to go off island?
Actually, for all three kids, I didn't give them too much of a choice. College was it. They had to go to college. John was the one who guided Jay and sat him down and said, this is what you need to do. Look at the schools you're interested in. Look at all the requirements. Write whatever essays you need to. And
did you raise them alone?
No, their father was a very active in their life.
Big role in their life. Okay, so and then your youngest is how many years apart between Jay and the youngest?
9 years.
9 years. So
Yes.
did they have a close relationship as well too?
Yes, they did. Because when John went to school, it was Jay and Jose were the ones that were left, and so Jay, like John, took charge and became the big brother to Jose.
Okay, so now
he had
took
somebody
that
to
role.
boss around.
Finally,
and
right?
take
It's
charge
hard to
of.
be the middle child.
Yeah,
right?
and he was the baby for a long time.
Wow.
So Jay was the baby for 9 years.
So you said he was your prince. He was the Prince
I
Charming.
referred to him as my Prince Charming.
Did you know what he was gonna? I mean, what he aspired to be growing up?
No, he never mentioned anything in particular.
Did he have any interest, things that he did as a kid? That
He
you
would
know,
write
kind of-
a lot of stories. He read a lot of books growing up. And the first time we had a computer at home, he would literally write his own stories. He'd write story after story after story. And, Mom, how does this sound? Mom, how does that sound? What do you think of this? But he never came right out and said he wanted to be a writer, or he never openly
Didn't want to follow in mom's footsteps and be a journalist?
No, he never said that growing up. He never referred to it. He just did what he wanted to do. And
So he went to school here, elementary, middle school, and high school.
correct.
Graduated and went to.
UNL, University of Nevada in Las Vegas.
Okay, was that his choice? I mean,
Yes,
is there something?
he and his first cousin that he's also very close to, Henry Michael, they decided that they were going to go to school together.
Right out of high school.
Right out
Went
of high
straight.
school. They went straight from high school, end of summer. Of course, they stayed home for the last summer, and then they
Did
went
you
off
worry about
together.
him at all?
Of
going?
course. Mother always worries
I know.
about,
I mean, I could imagine. One of the reasons why I'm taking you back in time, because I know what that's like, you know, as a mom too, sitting here with you, just imagining the growth of your child, and you see them develop into this, and you imagine their lives, they're going to be great, you know, and because we all hope that for our children. So did he graduate from UNLV?
Yes, he did.
He did. Okay,
In
so how?
2010.
And you went out there for his graduation?
That's correct.
Did you visit him periodically? Like,
Yeah,
throughout
and
the 4
when
years?
whenever I went off island, I would make it a point. If he did not come to where I was at, which was usually in California, I would make sure that I would fly out to Las Vegas.
Your older boy was also in California.
Yes, he lives in San Francisco.
More the north side.
Correct.
So you travel between the north and Las Vegas
yes.
to go. Now, going to school, did he have any issues at all while he was in college?
No, nothing major.
Healthy?
He was healthy. He worked out. He's passionate about jiu-jitsu.
Oh, okay. So he was into sports?
Yes, and
Ate healthy,
yeah,
normal college
kid. But
Okay.
he was a junk food junkie. Jay is a real sweet tooth. He loved sweets.
Who did he take after? Mom?
Mom.
Yeah, that's okay. At least he has a sweet tooth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when did we start to notice that?
I had planned to take my youngest son to college in August of 2013. So our plan was that Jay would fly out for the weekend and meet. We were all going to meet in San Francisco, and as a family set up Jose, my youngest, in college.
And was Jose going to Las Vegas too?
No, we were all. Jay was going to fly out to. Jose is going to St. Mary's College in Moraga.
Wow.
And so the plan was that we were all going to meet in San Francisco and get Jose set up at his new dorm.
Well, one of the interesting things, and we're going to focus on Jay's situation, but your oldest also has had cancer.
Yes.
Had. Cleared.
He's cleared.
Gone.
He is
All gone.
been, yeah, he's cured.
They had two different types of cancer?
Yes. John had Hodgkin's, Jay had non-Hodgkin's.
Can you just give me a little idea what's the difference between the two?
I think it's the cell, I guess, that they refer to, or the founder or the discoverer. Hodgkin's, there's only one type of Hodgkin's. As non-Hodgkin's, there's like 20 plus, I think, different types of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But they're both a form of lymphoma.
And that is a lymphoma is cancer of the blood.
That's correct. So your lymphatic system.
Gets in your system, it goes all over the place.
That's correct.
Wow. So the oldest, he beat it.
Yes, he did. He was his was brief. We found him early.
How old was he?
He was in his mid-20s as well.
Mid-20s.
Yeah. And he went through several rounds of chemotherapy and radiation, and
as
he's
a mom,
been clean since.
When you got that call that your oldest boy, did you fly out there?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Right away.
To be with him?
Yes.
And how long was his treatment from the beginning to the end?
Went from October. He was diagnosed in September, October, and he was done with chemotherapy, I think, and I could be wrong. He went through like 12 or 18
treatment.
week treatment, and then he went into radiation right after. And
he was diagnosed stage 1?
Stage 2.
2.
Yeah.
What was your reaction?
I looked it up, and I wasn't worried because Hodgkin's is actually a very curable cancer, and so the survival rate for Hodgkin's was pretty high, and he was being treated at Stanford, which is in the Bay Area, and his oncologist told me I can cure this. I can take care of him.
Very, very confident.
Very confident.
Made you feel more relaxed and at ease.
That's correct. And he did participate in, it was a research, it's called the Stanford 5, and it went pretty well, and he was in and out. And he will say that his treatment, and it's like a Hawaiian vacation compared to what his brother went through. So
this is it. Mom, done. And you're all clear. And then we find out about Jay.
Yeah, before we, Jay he called me every afternoon, usually around 2 or 3 Guam time, when he was on his way home from work in Vegas. He'd always call and, "Hey, Mama, what you doing?" And I just got off work, and this is what I covered today. And usually going through a drive-through to get something to grab a bite to eat. But I noticed when he was calling me in like June or July, he always had a cough. And I said, "You've had that cough for a while. Have you been checked?" And he said, "Yeah, it's this and that." And he also called and indicated to me that he had collapsed at work. I think that was like in June or first part of July, but that was attributed because the temperatures in Las Vegas are 114 degrees.
Wow.
So he assumed that he was
different
dehydrated.
environment.
So
you didn't worry too much.
And he was just.
Before we get really deep into Jay's story, we'll come back and we'll talk more about it, and we'll go back to the beginning of Jay's story, because you had your oldest, and that was it. You were done. We went through it. This was a tough situation, but you didn't realize that the worst was yet to come. So when we come back, we'll talk about Jay's story after this. Welcome back to my story. We're continuing the story of Jay with his mom, Yvonne Cruz. We went through your boys' lives growing up, and now we're here at Jay's story. We talked about your son earlier who got cancer, beat it, and the relief. I'm sure it felt so good. It's like, okay, my boy's okay. Then you talked about Jay constantly calling you, of course, maybe in the drive-through, but at least he was calling you.
Yes, he does. He called me regularly.
Regularly? So if he didn't call you, then you'd be worried?
No, because he would,
He would still call you.
He would still call.
You weren't worried he wasn't going to call you.
Yeah, he would always keep in touch.
So he was how old already by this time?
He was 26.
26.
20.
And he would call you
27, I'm
regularly.
sorry, 27.
27?
Yes.
He would call you regularly. You noticed he had a cough?
Yes, he
Like what kind of cough though? I mean, because there's different types. There's the real, or like
no, he just kind of sounded like
he had a cold.
yeah, like he had a
Like
cold.
there's something building up in there.
Yeah,
and
he
get
just
it
had
out.
a cough, and it seemed to be. I mean, it would clear, and then it would come back, and it would clear, and
And this is every time he called.
Just towards the summertime before, as I was getting ready to leave to meet up with them, and I had mentioned to him like in July. I said, you got to go get that checked. Because every time I
been
call you,
months.
yeah, and he called me one afternoon and told me that they had diagnosed him with bronchitis. That was
So he did go get checked.
yes, he did go get checked.
Do they just look in his lungs and say, "Okay, you have bronchitis," or they just?
They just, I guess,
Diagnosed
automatically,
him
yeah,
just
they said it
from
was
what?
bronchitis, and they gave him antibiotics, and I guess it went away for a little bit, came right back. He went back again. They gave him a different type of antibiotic, and then I think it was his office, because he continued. He would still go to work. Jay loved his job, and he would not miss work for anything. And so
Got good work ethic, that's for
very,
sure.
very, very strong work ethic, and his office shared that a lot throughout his. He worked for a very good station. It was finally his boss who said, "You know what? You sound awful and you look awful. Let me refer you to another doctor."
Look awful, meaning
Yeah,
already
he
it was
was
affecting
already
his physical.
pale, I guess. I don't know if he noticed that he was dropping weight. He didn't seem to mention his
But
weight
was he?
loss. I didn't know. I wasn't seeing him, so I couldn't say whether or not he was losing weight. He never mentioned it. So he did go back in, and by that time it was already August time frame, and he went to see the other doctor, and he told the doctor that he was on one or two
Antibiotics.
different antibiotics. So this last one finally said, "Let's just do an X-ray to make sure you don't have pneumonia." And by then it was August, and I was on my way
There.
to California already.
Because you were bringing your youngest boy.
That's correct. So we arrived in San Francisco on a Thursday morning, and Jay was still in Las Vegas, and he called me Thursday night after we had dinner, and he said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "Well, I went to the doctor, and they took an X-ray, and I have a huge mass in my chest."
He didn't say cancer.
No, he didn't say
But
cancer.
did you already assume that it was
Yes.
cancer?
I
When he said
had
huge.
when he said he had a huge mass.
When
in
you
his
imagine huge, what is huge when you imagine it? I mean,
chest. I just thought, like softball size, maybe.
that's
just-
huge, right?
Yeah.
Softball size is huge. Was
And-
that the size of his mass?
No, his mass was. One doctor described it as the size of a loaf of bread squished into your
Oh my gosh.
chest cavity. And it would bend and fold and wrap to fit, and that was the size of the mass. That
So it just basically took over his chest
Yes.
cavity. He, 12, so how many months was that? From the time you noticed him coughing, do you think that could have been when the mass started?
I had asked the doctors if they could estimate when his mass, how long the mass was there. They said they could not.
They couldn't?
Based on that particular, just none of the doctors that he saw initially wanted to even venture to guess. As
You
to
said he had non-Hodgkin's
non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
lymphoma. And you also mentioned that there was many different types of non-Hodgkin's. Did they pinpoint what type he had?
Yes, by September, after he did have a biopsy done, and it took a while, but he was diagnosed, it's kind of a long name, with mediastinal diffuse B-cell lymphoma. Diffuse B-cell lymphoma is not, it's actually one of the more common non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but the mediastinal, meaning it's in his mediastinum, in the middle of his chest, is what makes it rare, because the mass encases all the major organs and arteries, your your lungs.
That's where everything is at.
trachea.
Your vital function, your heart, your lungs, everything
all
is
your major
there.
arteries. That's correct.
So do you think, I mean, it wasn't a very long period, so it was very aggressive?
Yes, it was very aggressive.
When they caught it, what stage was he in?
He was diagnosed at stage 4.
4.
He was already at stage 4. It had spread far beyond
Did
his
you?
chest
What was
cavity.
your feeling? He was just talking to you over the phone.
As soon as he called us Thursday night, so my oldest son bought my mother and I tickets to Vegas the very next day. So we flew out to Vegas Friday. I thought Jay's cough was just bad, but he could not lay flat to sleep. He had to sleep sitting up, because if he laid flat, he would start coughing.
Did you ever ask him, son, why didn't you tell me that you were going through all of this sooner?
Because it didn't get, he
You
said it was
never,
never, yeah.
Never thought anything of it.
Yeah.
So when you got there, what was he like? Did he look like the normal Jay? Did he have a
Yeah,
different
with
look?
the exception that he couldn't lift. He was tired and he was coughing. He would struggle to breathe. When we went to the store and I'm so used to saying, Jay, can you carry this in? And he lived on the 3rd floor of his apartment complex, and I bought 2 cases of water. And I figured, oh, Jay, can you carry this up? He couldn't. He couldn't
John
breathe.
wasn't with you.
No.
How did John feel? I mean, he had cancer. Did he say, my brother can make it through this?
To be really honest, throughout his entire treatment, not once did I think Jay would not survive.
Really? So you had that confidence?
I had that confidence that he was
How
going to
about
beat
Jay? What was his feeling?
it. Jay also felt very confident that he could beat it.
He's young. It can happen, right?
Yeah, and he, and I guess because his doctors, we were all very optimistic that
Even
we
with
can.
that mess.
Because after he went in, he finally went in. He was admitted for his first chemo in September, and between September and December, every time he went in for chemo, he would stay in. He would be hospitalized for 5 days at a time because his chemotherapy required hospitalization.
Wow, that's pretty.
And then
pretty
he'd be
heavy
out for
chemo.
he'd be out for 2 weeks, and then he'd go in, and so we went through the cycle.
Were you with him that whole time?
Yes.
2 weeks. What was the 2 weeks like in between the chemo?
The beginning, it was kind of rough, and he'd be tired, he'd feel weak, and then he'd start to
Gain his strength.
gain his strength back, and then we had to start
Do
all
it
over.
all over
Yeah.
again. And how many times did he have to do that?
He did it a total of 8.
8?
8 times, and then.
But he's young. His body is strong. He can take it, right?
Yeah, and he did pretty well.
So how big was the mass after the 8?
It was like
Really,
just-
from a loaf of bread to this?
Yeah, to a little speck.
So it works. Chemo works.
That's what it seemed like. But his doctor never said that he would not say that he was in remission. She said, I will not commit to anything until I actually read the PET scan results. And
So what did you do after the 8 weeks? I mean, the 8 treatments. Did you?
we were told he would require radiation.
Okay.
So we had to go and schedule. He needed to be marked up and start radiation immediately. And so he started radiation in January. During the radiation, they had to stop it for a little bit and remeasure him again, because they had noticed to expand the radiation field, because his cancer had already started to
becoming
expand.
aggressive again. So did he go through some kind of testing?
He actually went through multiple. After radiation, they gave him time to heal, and then they did another PET scan. Again, the same spot stayed, didn't really go down.
This thing was not going to let him go, was it?
No. So he
Did you
got
ever get angry? I mean, like, why? Why don't you just go away?
No, I actually tried to stay upbeat and positive. He did. He was frustrated. He was tired. He wanted to go back to work. He wanted to feel normal again. He had a port installed, and then later on he had catheter, and so he just wanted to feel,
get it out and be normal
and
again.
feel normal again. So he was getting frustrated.
He went through that testing after radiation. What was that like?
They
what was the
told
test
him-
for, though?
They did a PET scan to see to see if the cancer had actually cleared. They have to allow your body time to heal after radiation.
So it was just
you
a
don't
PET
get any-
scan then?
It was a PET scan.
Simple.
And
Simple.
It came back that there was no change, and we were told that he would require bone marrow transplant.
Wow.
He didn't like that, and they said, well, if you don't do the bone marrow transplant, I can guarantee you within a year you will be back in worse condition than when you came in.
So he agreed.
So we said, okay. So he had some time off. They started the bone marrow prep in June, and by the time they harvested it was his own stem cells they were going to use initially, until they could find a match. His younger brother was not a match. His older brother could not be tested, and so they had to go and do the public
own.
pool. But they said, we'll start off with his own stem cells. And by the time we went in for his bone marrow, the transplant, he was already coughing again, and they said that the transplant would be useless. So instead of the transplant, he started a different type of chemotherapy. And so they tried him on several types of chemotherapy and another type of trial. Neither one really made any difference. So the doctor finally decided to actually look for clinical trials that he would qualify for, because she basically said that nothing she has really would seem,
She never lost hope, though.
No.
When did you decide that that's it? I mean, let's bring him back here.
He was the one who actually...
He's the one who decided that?
He decided, yeah. He went through a clinical trial in Maryland, and he was comatose for a month, and he lost some of his memory. He just became very weakened, and it cleared again. The bulk, 90% of the tumor, the mass had cleared, but within 30 days it came back.
This thing's not going to let him
the Bethesda doctors basically said, there's nothing more we can do. We're referring you back to your primary oncologist in California. We went back. She basically told us, I have options that he hasn't tried, but if it was my son, she said he's already on his 6th round of treatment, and by this point it becomes useless.
What did you think?
I just wanted him to be as comfortable as possible, and we decided that we would try cannabis oil as a last resort, because she said, if you want to bring him home, this is the time, but there's really not much more that can be done medically.
So you brought him back here.
He actually, we took him to Disneyland first. We took a family vacation to Disneyland. That's one of his favorite places. And we also tried the cannabis oil. And then he finally said, as he became weaker and weaker, he said, Mom, I need to go home now.
So he decided.
Yeah, he decided.
And he made the trip here.
Yes, he was actually fine. Pretty much the last 3 hours, he was fine the whole way until 3 hours outside of Guam in the plane that he started to struggle to breathe. And
did he make it through the flight?
Yes, he did.
He did. So he came home.
We came home. We arrived on Guam at 6:30 on a Saturday night. Jay left us on Sunday night at around 6:30. But he was surrounded by his entire family, so he went comfortably.
That was comforting.
His brother, likewise, his older brother, didn't fly back with us, so we had him and his best friends, who were his best friend Ramona Batanga, who is in Chicago. They were all online, and so
we
we
were
all,
able to Skype with him.
So he was
Thank
he
goodness for
was surrounded by everybody he loved.
Do you worry about your younger son?
Yes, I do, but
Your
the boys' oncologist basically said that I just had a case of bad luck, that their cancers were not genetic, not related.
That's bad luck.
And yeah,
that's interesting.
So
choice of words. You know, Mom, 2 boys, cancer. But you doesn't stop you from worrying, though.
No, it doesn't.
No, not at all.
And she basically said so long as he gets regular physicals and that he is very mindful of what's right for his body, what feels normal, and that he pays attention to any unusual signs.
And that's good advice for anybody, really.
Yes, that's correct, for
So
anybody.
is that the type of advice that you would give?
Yes. Eat healthy. Eat healthy. I've started eating more organic. Of course, on Guam we don't have as much organic
Right.
as you would in the States. But eat healthy, be a little more active.
As a mom, I thank you for sharing your story, because this will help open up other parents' eyes and maybe give them a little bit of strength, to go through what you went through. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you for, opening up Jay's story and allowing us to celebrate his life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hapaday, welcome back to My Story. I'm Louise Muña. I wanted to introduce you to a good friend of mine and former coworker,
Yes.
Tiffany Kidigwa. Tiff?
Yes.
Okay, you prefer to be referred to as Tiff.
Tiff is good, yes.
Okay, so you are not a survivor or warrior.
No.
Your sister?
Yes, my
Okay,
sister.
What is her name?
Her name is Ashley.
Ashley.
Kidigwa. She
Do
looks
you-
just like me,
Really?
but I'm prettier.
Okay, I'll believe you. Do you refer to her as Ashley, or do you
Yes.
have a special name for her?
We call her Ash. Unless she's
Ash?
in trouble, then it's Ashley.
Okay, that's the Chamorro way, right?
Yes.
So your sister and you, how many are you, like, pretty similar in age?
Yes, we're
Okay.
only a year apart, almost exactly.
Who's older, you or
I
her?
am older.
You're
Mhm.
older? Okay, so I just want to rewind back to, obviously she's not here anymore, which is why we're not able to interview her, but
Right.
we're going to allow you to share her story.
Okay.
She, a normal girl growing up?
Yes.
Okay, you two were sisters. Were you like bound at the hip?
We were.
You were? Okay.
There are three of us sisters.
Okay.
Because Ashley and I are closest in age.
Okay.
We were always together.
Okay.
No one who knew me did not know my sister. So, yeah, we
And
did
vice
everything
versa,
together.
pretty much,
Absolutely.
right? So
All
your
of her
friends were hers and your friends were hers?
Yes.
Okay, so vice versa, except for the boyfriends.
Thankfully.
Okay. Okay, so you're older.
Yes.
Did you have a more dominant more dominance over her? Like you were the older sister. She always went to you for anything?
I was, yes.
Okay.
So it's not that I raised them, but I was a big part of, taking care of them and leading them and everything. Definitely.
Is that because you experienced things first?
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's expected in the culture too,
Okay, so your sister had what type of cancer?
It was an ovarian cervical cancer. These days we use both names. When it happened, they didn't give us a specific either because it was it had happened so quickly for us to find out. So we just used both since it was pretty
So it was
major.
in the female reproductive area.
Yes.
She started her period. What age?
She was in the 7th grade, so
Okay.
maybe 13.
13? Okay, and that's about average,
Pretty
right?
typical, yeah.
Was there anything abnormal about her menstrual cycle?
We were taught that it's okay for irregularness or kind of heavy or overly light bleeding, right? For a year or two after
You
we
begin?
first start, right?
Okay.
So
When you say we, did you both get it at the same time?
roughly in the same area.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Hormones work very closely with each other.
Yes, proximity works. So she was irregular for a couple of years, but we didn't pay any mind at all, since most of the girls our age, were going through the same thing.
Now, there's so many different types of irregularity, right? So would she skip a month? Would she skip a few days? Or would she skip months at a time?
In the beginning, she was skipping months at a time.
Okay.
Or bleeding constantly for months at a time.
Wow. And was that not a major concern to bleed for months at a time?
We were kids at the time, so we were like, no, it's going to be okay. Let's not say anything. It'll eventually figure itself out.
I would imagine, though, that would have affected her growing up. You go out, you play sports,
right.
You do things. I mean, wouldn't that affect her ability to perform any of these duties, having her period for months at a time? Did it not concern her?
It was just something she learned to live with, that we learned to deal, I guess.
Okay, so she had irregular periods. I mean, did anything else progress from there? 13, right?
Yeah, she was 13. Nothing other than that was out of the ordinary until I would say 2011, 2012. She had already graduated from high school.
Okay, that's about, 17 years old maybe?
She was 18.
Okay.
She graduated 2011 from GW. And so our family had a restaurant at the time. We were working really hard all the time. And she chose to go into the Culinary Academy of GCC.
I was going to ask you, what did she do,
Yes.
Because, I mean, as a teenager, you don't really have too many, too much direction yet as far as what you're going to do in life.
Right.
But your family owns a restaurant. So was that a natural thing for her to get into?
It was not. They were wondering which of us would, and I didn't show any interest in it. I would do it because it was the family business. And when it was time for her to go into college, we were just hoping she would go. And she finally chose. She said, I'm going to go into cooking. We said, thank goodness you
I'm
chose
sure that made your
something.
mom proud, right?
Yes.
Now someone can take over the business, right?
So she went into that in 2011, working really hard. She was still a healthy weight and everything, but we all...
What is a healthy weight, though, for a 17-year-old?
Well, she wasn't overweight for her height, and she wasn't totlang, she wasn't very small.
Okay.
So I thought, everything was okay.
Okay, so she's average, right? Okay.
And eventually she started having back pain similar to the ones my mom and I and my father had.
Because you're on your feet all day.
Feet all day. We're always lifting the sack of rice. Someone's got to do it, right? So we sent her to the chiropractor, and it helped in the beginning, the way it helps with us to regulate us. And she started losing weight. And we didn't understand
quickly
why.
or
very quickly.
Very quickly.
She does not have a good diet, so we didn't know. This is not salad, right? Why are you losing so much weight? I was jealous. I'm like, you're dropping weight.
But it could be,
on?
young, metabolism is stronger. You can eat whatever you want to when you're young, but when you get older, then you got to watch what you eat. So you weren't concerned about her diet either, but you were concerned that she was losing weight. Okay.
That's when we thought maybe there's something going on, and she started getting very pale. She started being in pain a little bit more often.
Pale meaning her color is just changing?
Yes.
Was she feeling lightheaded or dizzy?
Very often.
That's signs of being anemic, right? Okay.
And my mom is anemic, so my mom noticed the signs and brought her in to get checked. They said yes, she's really close to being anemic, or she was right there. I can't remember. So they started giving her protocol, right? Iron pills, birth control pills to regulate her blood flow. They knew that her blood flow was irregular. She was losing too much.
It could have been because she was having her period for months at a time, right? So from 13 to 18, that's a 5-year span.
Right.
She was going through these irregularities for so long that it became a everyday part of her life. Did it hinder her culinary dreams, though? I mean, did you ever notice, she start to decide, no, maybe this is not what I want to do?
Never.
No, she was always...
She kept on.
Okay.
Even when she was in a lot of pain. It meant that she had to work less with the family so that she could work harder at school. She could only stand for so long. She would end up having to bring a chair to the stove to
and that didn't
do the
concern
cooking and
her.
everything. Well,
I mean, she's 18. That's very young.
We thought it was just the typical pains and everything.
Okay.
So it started to get really bad. One day she passed out in class.
Wow. Just fainted.
But
that's okay. That's another thing, right? Okay. When people faint, maybe they didn't eat or something like that, right? What made it an issue that she passed out? I mean,
that's probably one of the things we are most sad about. That at the time it was unfolding, we didn't.
You weren't recognizing.
No,
you were
definitely
just.
Not.
I mean, not to say anything, but not like making excuses, like,
Right.
okay, this is why this is happening, this is why this is happening. So it wasn't anything beyond the ordinary, right? And that's common. People do that all the time. But she's 18. Okay, so let's rewind. Was this 2000? I mean, let's fast forward 2011.
By this
Right.
time, she is
She passed
19.
out in class.
She's 19. She passed out in class. We knew that was going on. Her birthday's in July, so she was 20 by this time, really thin, having lots and lots of back pain. She can't stand for long periods of time. She's
The doctor that diagnosed her as anemic, did they even go anything beyond that? They didn't
did
even
not.
say, oh, let's check. I mean, does she have regular appointments after the diagnosis of being anemic?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
And when we finally found out, almost exactly a year later, that's what the oncologist was mentioning, that when they knew she had irregularities in this area, when they diagnosed her there, they could have at least ultrasounded her. That's something that could have helped them see the huge growth that was already there.
When you say huge, what do you mean by huge?
There were supposedly, not a football size, but it was a very large growth, 2 large growths that she had. And
Is it close to the size of a football?
I think that's
How
what they
could
were
she,
mentioning.
I mean, do you
How could
think
it
maybe
not?
she could not have, like, felt that? Or maybe she did and just was afraid to say that something was going on in there?
I remember pressure, like she mentioned pressure, and it was just a weird pain, and then it started affecting her back really crazily, and we found out that it was because the cancer had started to eat away the bones in her pelvis and in her
But she didn't even know she had cancer yet.
No, but that's what was causing the back pain in 2013.
2013. So when did she get diagnosed? When?
She was diagnosed in October
Of
2013.
13.
Early October.
What did the doctors say? I mean, she went in, doctors.
The first thing we heard was a Friday, and they said that it was definitely ovarian cancer or cervical cancer. And we said, okay. My mom's sister had some kind of growth and had to get a hysterectomy, and she's living fine 5-6 years later. So on that Friday, I was relieved. I said, oh, she's going to be fine. Hysterectomy, everything's going to be good. On Monday, it was Memorial Day or whatever in October, and I was off. I wasn't, working at the station or anything, and she had an appointment with the oncologist. The rest of the results came back, and they said it wasn't something operatable. They said it was stage 4. It had taken over most of her system, and she was starting to swell, like her lungs were filling with fluid, and it was affecting so many things. So he was being very straightforward, and he said, you maybe have 6 months with her. Wow. But that's overly
Was
optimistic.
she there in front of the doctor?
She was there. So
and the doctor was
her,
addressing
my
you
father.
and her and your dad.
Yes.
Wow.
So that was
6 months. What was her? Did you look at her? What was her reaction? You couldn't look at her?
No. So I am, her pillar of strength, right? So she kind of crumpled in her chair. She's in so much pain, right? She's scared. So ramrod straight in my chair, right? So we heard, and he said maybe 6 months, and he said he was being optimistic for us. So
Being optimistic at 6 months.
yes, and he did not recommend that we move out to the specialist in LA unless we were willing to stay out there for that long, blah, blah,
She's
blah.
20.
She's 20 years old.
20.
And my father
Wow.
said, what do we have to do? And we'll send her out.
You guys are willing to do anything.
He was. My father, my parents were. So he said, we're going to start putting her through chemotherapy, a little bit radiation, just to prepare her to go if that's what you want to do. We left, and we had to go back, report to my mom what had happened, right? She's running the restaurant. So we had taken 2 cars. I got in the car with my sister, and she was so scared. And I told her it was going to be okay, right? Her flight itinerary and all the arrangements materialized very quickly. We were very blessed to have family who were able to help us arrange for everything. She was gone within the next week. She left to LA.
Okay. Were you with her?
I was not.
Oh.
So she moved out, or they took her to LA.
What
She
was
had
that like saying goodbye to her?
how do you send someone to die?
Right?
How do you
Did
do
you
that?
feel that way already? That she was going to go?
Absolutely.
That was the last time you were going to see her?
And I knew. I didn't want them to send her out because she was so far gone. But as a parent, you can't give up, right? So I understood.
If it were up to you, you would have
would've-
said, just stay here.
Right.
Let's enjoy you for the rest of the
Right,
time.
take care of her.
Okay.
So they were able to send her back. They gave her the best treatment she could. For a while, she started responding to the treatment, but she was in such a poor state that they wouldn't operate on her or anything. It was just a matter of keeping her comfortable.
Should they bring her back?
She was out there for 30 days before she died. So we knew for
Did
a
she
whole...
die there?
She did.
So you didn't even... She's 20.
She was 20. I was 21. And she died on November 21st.
Were you
So it's
shocked
coming
when
up
you got the
fast.
call, or did you know?
I was not. I didn't get a chance to talk to her for very long while she was out there. We were busy making sure the bills got paid, and I was working and going to school. And
30 days, Tiff.
30 days.
That's how much time you had to say goodbye to her.
Right.
So this whole time, this thing is eating up at her, and things were happening to her, and it wasn't something that was even a concern because of her age. So, I mean, just what kind of advice would you give to somebody, you know, as coming from your point of view? What would you tell somebody, even at your age or their age? You know, what would you advise?
Definitely to look for help. You know, I have recently scheduled to get myself checked and make sure everything is in order. It took me way too long. It's been 2 years since she died.
2 years?
But I do, you know, hope that everyone does get the kind of help that's available to at least make sure that everything's in order. And there was
And
a
don't
chance.
brush him off.
No,
Right.
there was a chance we could have helped her much, you know, further back then.
Do you ever
we
tell
found
yourself
out.
that? I wish I could have.
Yes. If there's something I could have done, we would have said something. But
If
We just move from here.
you sitting here and you're shedding your tears helps someone else, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
In memory of your sister Ashley.
that's what we look to do.
Thank you. Welcome back to My Story. Thank you to Tiffany Kidwell for sharing her sister's story on her battle with uterine cancer. There are 2 gynecological cancers, cervical and uterine, that are among the top 10 most common cancer cases here on Guam. To help us understand these types of cancers, we sought out to the medical mind of OBGYN, Dr. Ellen Bez.
Let's start with uterine cancer, because uterine cancer is the #1 cancer in terms of, in the U.S., the most cases of gynecologic cancer are uterine cancer. And the average age of diagnosis is in the 60s. But I'd like to make the point that even though the average age might be 60, we have cases where people can get these diseases or these cancers in their 20s, 30s, and even later in life beyond. So the average doesn't mean that it doesn't occur in younger ages. One of the risk factors is PCO, which means your ovaries, actually polycystic ovaries. And that and it has to do with obesity. And obesity is a factor in getting uterine cancer, because as you gain weight, estrogen gets stored in some of the fat cells. So it causes an imbalance in hormones. And when that happens, the tendency is to not get your period. So one of the risk factors for uterine cancer is women who have irregular periods for long, and which causes heavy periods. If you don't get your period for 2 or 3 months and the lining is building up and up and up, and then you have a period, of course, you're going to have a very heavy period. So I always like to make the point that if you're not getting your period every month, that's abnormal. And I just had someone tell me the other day that she's only getting 3 periods a year. it's not healthy, it's not normal. And that's one of the things you need to see your doctor for, because then your hormones are out of balance and we need to figure out why and adjust it. Because if you're having this estrogen, this high amount of estrogen all the time that's building up your uterine lining, that's a factor that can cause uterine cancer. In the US or in developed countries, cervical cancer is the number 2 cancer in terms of frequency. But in undeveloped countries where they don't have Pap screening, cervical cancer is the number 1 cause of death of gynecologic cancers. But here it's not so much, because we do screening and we have the Pap test, which is a wonderful screening method for cervical cancer. Now, cervical cancer, unlike uterine or ovarian that can have a genetic component, cervical cancer isn't like that. 99.7% the cause of cervical cancer is the HPV virus. And there's a lot of talk of what HPV is. Human papillomavirus is the name of the virus that causes cervical cancer. How do you get that? You get it by having many sex partners, sex at an early age, even having multiple births, but all that speaks to the fact that you're having sex at an early age. So the risk factors are really through sexual transmission. Now we have a vaccine for HPV, so it doesn't take away the need to still have Pap smears. Hopefully, someday that might happen, but right now all the data isn't in yet. But there is a vaccine now, and it's recommended that girls from 9 to women of 26 years old. So from 9 to 26 is a good time. Certainly before you become sexually active is really the best time, because then you haven't had the chance to be exposed to the virus. So that's the risk factors for cervical cancer. How do you treat it when you get it? Should you be diagnosed with cervical cancer? Again, like many cancers, the treatment is surgical. So you remove the cervix and the uterus, and not always the uterus. Again, all this depends on how advanced things are.
Before we close out the show, here are some local organizations that exist to assist patients diagnosed with cancer and their family members. These organizations are committed to assist cancer warriors and are strong in the fight against cancer on Guam. Thank you so much for watching this episode of My Story, and a special thank you to those who were on this show brave enough to share their cancer stories with us, all in an effort to bring cancer and cancer prevention to the forefront. You can catch this episode again right here on this Sorensen Media Group television station throughout the week, or you can view it on our website at sorensenmediagroup.com. Please join us again next time for another episode of My Story. Until then, from all of us here at My Story, adios.